Hi, guys, and welcome to our second episode of Convos on the Pedicab. My name is Alex Stranger, and I'm joined with a very special guest of mine, my friend Taylor Blount. Taylor, he's a journalist. He works for Michael Cargill's show, Come and Talk It. And he's also spent a lot of time as a journalist covering a ton of the protests. So the main focus of our episode is really going to be to dissect protest culture and figure out what these protests are about, who's behind the protests, if anyone is behind the protests, and just how the protesters are feeling, and what can we do to fix some of these things so that we don't have all the civil unrest that's going on right now. Just before we get started with this, I just want to let everybody know Taylor's gotten tested for COVID. He doesn't have the virus. I too don't have the virus. So in case you guys are concerned about us, not being so close to one another and not wearing masks, it's not because we are being irresponsible, and it's not because we're disregarding public health advice. So we just want to make that clear. This is about bringing people together. This is about us, trying to solve a lot of the problems or figure out meaningful solutions to the problems that we're facing here in Austin as well as in the United States. So this is supposed to be a unifying project and non-divisive on all fronts. So we're putting that out there for everybody.
Well, hello, Alex. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Hey, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. So is there anything that you would like to add?
Would I like to add? No. Thank you for having me on the show, and I'm happy to be here. So ask away. I know you got a lot of questions. We were talking a little bit before this and everything, but
So how did you get started in journalism, and how did you get started covering all these protests?
all right. It started like 6 months ago, I think. I ran into a journalist, and it was something I was always interested in doing. And she kind of made me realize that it wasn't just some dream; it was like a possibility. And then I just kind of moved to Austin, and I've been kind of going after that, chasing it ever since. And how did I get involved in the protest? I think originally, the first one I actually ever went to was on May 1st, which is about a month before the whole George Floyd thing happened, and the mass protests kind of happened all across our country. There was just one in Republic Park in Austin, and I went there to cover it and kind of see what it's about because I just saw some posters on the wall about it. And it was quite interesting. There was also a rent strike action that day, and the rent strikers drove down I-35, and they were corralled into a no parking zone by police and were arrested. And after that, that was kind of my first introduction to like protests here in Austin, and seeing that go down, it made me pretty interested about why these people do these things and what their message they're trying to send, and also the Austin Police Department's reaction to these things.
Okay, so I want to add to that, and as somebody who drives a pedicab in Austin, Texas, I was very openly anti-shutdown and anti-lockdown. I think that we should have never shut our economy down. I think that we should have probably taken the Sweden approach from the onset. And this would have probably eased a lot of the financial struggles that many of our small businesses and our individuals working here are facing. But that being said, I was going to a lot of the reopen protests too, because us being shut down has a direct effect on my ability to earn a living. It has a direct effect on my friends' ability to earn a living. And a lot of the people that I take in my cab, who are like pretty loyal customers who pay me pretty well, many of them own small businesses, and it was upsetting to see those people struggle too, because these are the people paying my salaries, right? So I was very much like anti-lockdown, and I was going to like the anti-lockdown protests. And one of the things that really got to me when they started doing all these stay-at-home orders was I was very afraid that our right to protest injustices by our government or by corporations was literally being undermined by people telling us that we have to stay home. So even though, I don't support communism and I think it's a horrible system of government and all of that stuff, my mom is from a communist country and, whatnot, I still was very supportive of these people going out and protesting. Even though I didn't agree with what they were doing, I was still really happy that they were protesting. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand that the majority of these people that were protesting that wanted us to reopen, that were protesting the COVID restrictions, were at first very supportive of the rent strike protest, just because of the fact that they were actively protesting, and we supported exercising your First Amendment to be able to do so.
Yeah, especially because people are losing their jobs, no money, they can't pay rent, and it's still a huge issue. I think evictions rates are just climbing, and there's a lot of groups that are out there, specifically United Neighborhood Defense Movement, I believe, is the name, and they're out there kind of helping people who are facing evictions.
But here's some other problems with rent strikes, though, right? Because you can't institute a rent strike without helping the owner of the property. Right?
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so like let's say I own a single family home and I have like renters that are renting part of my space out, and then they don't want to pay rent because of the pandemic, and then in turn the homeowner can't pay the property taxes or they can't pay their mortgage. So then all that happens is like a bank just repossesses the home and forces these people out anyway, and we also continuously limit the amount of people that have the ability to own their own homes, which is one of the cornerstones of being able to live here.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that kind of played out in 2008 a lot too, where people couldn't pay rent, or the homeowners couldn't pay their mortgage, so they couldn't rent it out, and a lot of people ended up just living on the streets. And we're seeing like homelessness kind of raise out in Austin, and it's not a good thing. It's a sad thing to see. I know you're talking about the unemployment rate only being like 8%, right?
We mentioned that on the way the way to get our beverage beforehand.
Yeah. So,
that's still a high number.
Yeah.
That's still a very high number. Like let's not get that wrong. Like that's not a good number to have. And this is the number. This is a little bit lower than the number that we had during the recession in 2009 or 10 or whatever, when we had our first housing crisis. So yeah, that is a big problem. Like that is a very high unemployment rate.
All right, so as someone who's running for like city council, how would you feel for like a citywide like rent ban for people who can't pay rent, and then somehow kind of freezing it so those people can get back on their feet again before buying again? You'd have to talk to the banks, of course.
Okay, look, man.
I mean, because
our city is raising taxes. Sorry, our city is raising taxes to the highest level in its history. We're raising taxes by 24% in the middle of our biggest economic recession. So we have to. This conversation starts with our city officials, and they're trying to finance these multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects like Project Connect, which is going to cost us billions of dollars on a year-over-year basis because you have to continually maintain and service this rail system. And then you add insult to injury with the fact that we are in a pandemic, and A, you're going to have less people riding the train because more people are going to work from home, and B, being in close quarters with people on a small compartment like a subway train is how you spread pandemics anyway.
Yeah, 6 feet back or 6 feet under.
6 feet back or 6 feet under. We're not following that right now.
Yeah,
but,
not really. Sorry, we both got tested. We're good.
We're good. So anyway, that's my take on that. So I think that we need to, if you're going to do a rent strike, you have to freeze property taxes or lower the taxes significantly. We have to be providing direct aid to the businesses that we shut down. I think that if you're going to tell somebody that they can't work or that they can't make a living without providing them with just compensation and having a plan to do that in advance, you are committing a human rights violation.
Yeah, it makes me kind of sad when I walk down 6th Street. It's all boarded up and everything. And it's like, it was such a lively area. I remember when I visited here before moving here, it was an amazing place. And it's just like seeing all the live music kind of disappear from the streets. And it's kind of upsetting. And it's like we're losing a part of our culture because of the shutdowns. It cut out a part of culture of Austin. And I think your whole idea of like saying we should have took the Sweden strategy is kind of wrong, though, because Swedish people have a very different culture than Americans. They don't tend to like group up as much as we do. They're always kind of isolationist already a little bit.
There's also almost no intergenerational living in Sweden too.
Yeah, that's true. And like you can see, like Italy had huge amounts of intergenerational living, which is one of the reasons it spread so fast.
Right, and that's why it's really bad in our Hispanic community. One of the reasons is because there's so much intergenerational living and a focus on family in those communities.
Yeah, I watched your last podcast about intergenerational wealth.
Yeah.
And do you think that plays into people having to live home, or do you think it's just a culture thing?
I think partially. I think in some ways it's a culture thing, but in other ways you have like a million people just, clumped together in the same house because there's no other alternative, or they're struggling on that much of a level. So I think it's a two-factor thing, and I also think that because of intergenerational living, there needs to be a better priority on actual real public health and proper nutrition, and we need to do a better job of utilizing our sustainable farms here in Austin to help people in low-income communities. And we have to build a lot more grocery stores, and we have to offer financial incentives for these grocery stores, especially in my district, to be able to have healthy food on the shelves. Because if you go to H-E-B in Dove Springs, it's all fast food and mystery meat on the that you see. Where you go to H-E-B in Mueller, or you go to Central Market, and you get like really good top of the line like organic food and whatnot. And we have to figure out a way to start offering meaningful financial incentives for grocery stores to start offering affordable, organic, non-processed food in those areas.
So I've lived here about 6 months now, and I have never been to an HEB.
You should probably go to one. And
I mean, I just go to like Royal Blue. It's pretty nice downtown.
Yeah,
it's good. So kind of back on topic. I know you want to talk a little bit about like protest culture.
I want to talk about protest culture. I think and please, you've been around this a lot more.
I kind of went out from the start when the first thing kind of went down, and I was actually I kind of went out in the morning when everyone walked on the highway the first kind of days of protest.
I was there too, and this is when things started to kind of shift for me.
Cameraman was there too.
I know you got pepper sprayed. I know. I was there. Gary actually told me.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. And that same night, I had to go to work because I got a job as like a doorman at like some bar on 6th Street. It was right across from the place that ended up people breaking into. It was private stock.
Okay.
Right across the street was where I worked.
So that's the thing, right? You're protesting oppression and social injustice and police brutality, but then you're destroying small business and terrorizing people who have nothing to do with why you're oppressed.
On the specific note of like that night that happened, I don't think those people were really protesters. They're opportunists trying to take something that they could because they knew there was like chaos out there and they knew they could get away with it. I think it was an opportunistic thing. So you see those people don't come back to protest. Those people don't continue trying to like change and try to fixing like social issues. They don't push those stuff because they're only there for like opportunism.
Right. But the same people that were protesting during the daytime were also the same people lighting cars on fire on 8th Street and Red River by where that homeless camp was, because I saw that also. And then let's also elaborate on this. And those same people would get really angry if somebody were to start defending their business from somebody who was an opportunist. So it's like if you want no association with that, then you have to actually actively, if you are a person who's in charge of these protests, or if you are a leading organizer when it comes to this, and you see like random acts of like looting and violence and people terrorizing one another that have nothing to do with why you're having this protest, you need to immediately actively denounce those people. Just like when people and the same argument goes for people getting upset at Donald Trump because he didn't denounce white supremacy. It's the same thing. You have to denounce these bad elements so that people don't associate yourself with that.
Well, I get it. I've seen organizers denounce the looting and stuff. I remember when I was in Washington, D.C., they specifically talked about, it was like, we've always denounced the looting. We don't see you denouncing the people killing people who are, like, protecting property.
Wait, what do you mean?
I think it was specifically said at the March on Washington. I don't remember who it was who was speaking. He was like, we have denounced the, that distracted me. I was like, we've denounced the looting and the rioting, but we don't see you denounce the gun violence done against protesters or the violence of the police on those people.
No, I understand. Hey, Ken, I'll move. You sure? All right.
I'll deal with it.
No, we can move it. That's not a problem.
Well, dude, there's about a bunch of people going to show up here.
Well, we're trying to. We'll be done by like 6. It'll be all right. All right. Anyway.
What was that?
It's just another pedicabber. We may have to move our we may have to do all that fun stuff.
Charlie, get on and start pedaling. Let's go.
So, I get what you're saying. And you're not denouncing the police killing people in XYZ. First of all, that is false. Because people, when George Floyd got killed, every single person I knew, and most people I hang out with are white conservatives, especially going to 10th Planet full of conspiracy theorists and whatnot, the majority of these people are conservative and right leaning. Okay, and just even in the jiu-jitsu community, they're right leaning in a good way. Not in like a hateful, religiously zealotified or we want foreign wars or where racists are seen like not in any of those ways at all. But it's a right leaning. The majority of my friends and people I'm around are pretty right leaning, right? And every single one of them denounced the George Floyd killing, and they were like, that guy was fucking murdered. And a large majority of people that saw how Mike Ramos got shot, that's fucking murder. Like
Yes.
that guy got killed. And that's a product of poor training and poor de-escalation, and our cops need to be better at their job. Like that is plain as day. So I just want to be clear. People definitely did denounce that, and I do have a lot of friends who So hold on. I'm going off on this, but I think that when you're saying that the BLM protests are upset that people aren't denouncing like violence done by like business owners in self-defense, or like in defense of property. Well, first of all, like this violence wouldn't happen if you didn't have to worry about your small business being looted, especially in the face of a pandemic that has already like kind of decimated a lot of people financially, and then you add insult to injury, and people are like looting and destroying your small business, and you have no idea how like insurance is really going to cover all this stuff and what's going to happen to the business. It's like kicking someone in the face when they're like down and out is literally what this looting feels like in light of the pandemic, right? And B, if somebody there's a B. If somebody actually just murders a protester or plows their car into a sea of protesters for no reason, I've denounced that. Like I know a lot of people that are like, dude, this is horrible. There's no reason for that. That's hate. That's pure hatred. So like there is there's like extreme amounts of violence on both sides of this equation. And I think that it's kind of sad that a lot of the organizers of these protests are lumping everybody into the same category.
Yeah, I kind of agree. That's why I don't really like the Antifa term, because Antifa is fake. It's like it's an idea of anti-fascism, but like you see people label everybody Antifa who wears like black garb, is like dressed in black bloc. It's like it seems a bit like dehumanizing. The same way like someone on the left will say, "Oh, you're a Nazi because you support Trump." It's a little bit of the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's like 100% true. And like look, I listen to Alex Jones from time to time, and I have friends who work for Infowars, but like I'm by no way, shape, or form a fucking Nazi or a white supremacist. Like I'm a Jew with the Star of David tattoo on my arm. The white supremacists, they don't even think I'm white. You know what I mean? So I think that if you want to like in order to stop that stuff from happening, we have to be more open-minded about how we communicate with one another.
Yeah, I think you really just want to sit down. We need to sit down and talk to each other. A couple, I think it was last Friday or Saturday, there was an event that took place in front of the state capitol. And it was, I think it was called the Refuse Fascism event. I guess that's what the thing was called. But only people who showed up were Trump supporters and a small amount of protesters. There was about 30 people there, counting both sides. And at first, it got very angry. They would yell at each other and stuff. But eventually, they sat down and started talking to each other, which I found very interesting. And because you don't really see that. You assume, because like you watch the media, they're gonna like immediately fight. If you see a guy someone wearing all black, and then you see someone like holding a Trump flag, they're gonna immediately assault each other. One has no mask, one has a mask on. It's like a huge duality of that. But I saw them talking to each other and actually discussing ideas and sitting down. After a while, of course, when it first happened, they were like agitating each other, yelling at each other. But slowly, they started to actually talk to one each other. And I think it's like a huge communication breakdown because we're just watching on the news this abstract thing that is pushing us against one each other. And I think it's kind of like a divide conquer ideology by who, I don't know. But I think we just need to talk to each other, and communication is the best tool humans have. Language was our first tool, and it should still be our last.
No, I agree, and I bet you when they started talking to each other, they probably realized that they had a lot more in common than they thought.
I heard that said a lot that night.
They probably agreed on a lot more than they disagreed on. And I think it opened people's minds up, and it made people realize, like, hey, man, we really are on the same team. And I think that's the message that we really need to come across. So one of the things that really kind of got me upset about the protests, like after like the first week of like rioting and what it devolved into, was that a lot of the same people that were telling on one another for opening up their small businesses or saying, "Hey guys, you got to stay home," or XYZ, or pushing like this continuous advancements of shelter in place were the same people that were encouraging us to go out and riot. And that's when I started to figure.
Who do you mean?
I had a lot of like super left-leaning friends and people that were very like involved like with like the Democratic Party in Austin, Texas, locally. Because with having tried to run for mayor, there are certain people that I wind up making friends with, and a lot of those people, I'm not going to name names, they were very much pushing the stay-at-home orders onto people, and really fear-mongering like COVID in the beginning of it, right, the first like month or so, and then right when we started like kind of reopening, and right when we had these George Floyd protests, those same people were trying to encourage everybody to go out in droves and protest and disregard everything that they were saying in the face of public safety. And so that kind of, made like it set off a red flag. It made things a little bit. It seems a little bit weird if that makes any sense.
It seems like dual fear mongering in a way.
Yeah. It just seems like they were not being very genuine when they told us to stay home.
Yeah, I feel like people really try to use fear a lot as a tool on both sides, and it's just kind of like a way to use propaganda of fear to scare people. And like I can see it like from the police side too, as like they put that the police even put that billboard up there that said "Don't come to Austin, it's not safe." I don't remember exactly what it said. And did you see what Abbott did yesterday with trying to get everyone to sign that Back the Blue thing?
Dude, yeah, and you know what? Look. I'm not signing anything, even though I agree with him. I don't think that the way we defunded our police was smart at all. I think that we need meaningful police reform. We need our cops need to be better trained. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling need to be mandatory. I think that we need an independent review board to monitor all police misconduct. And I also think that our cops need to be EMT certified, especially after what happened in Garrett Foster. And we're going to talk about that really soon. But all of us could agree on that. Like, I could say this to like a bunch of Trump supporters and they would all agree with me, and I could say this to a bunch of Antifa BLM guys and they would mostly agree with me.
All right, I see that.
You know what I mean? But I'm not signing anything that has Greg Abbott's name on it, just for the fact that he's closing the bars and preventing me from being able to make a living without any thought as to how he's going to help me. So I'm not going to like sign or support anything that our governor's doing if he's not going to help me. So that's my attitude about it.
Yeah, it seems like an overstep of like the federal power, because like the city council already went through and did this, and he's like kind of a little bit like kind of strong arming us to refund the police department. And I think it's just kind of overstepping of his like power, because like the people kind of chose to have to defund and to reallocate those funds.
Yeah, but a lot of people are fucking pissed about this too. And to be fair,
that's true.
The way in which our city defunded the police was really irresponsible, man. And they literally are doing, and in how they defunded the police, they did nothing to help the people that they directly put out of work. If they said, "Hey man, we got to take some money away from our police departments for this 1 year because our service industry and our entertainment industry and our live music venues are really hurting, and we need to give back to the people that cannot operate as a result of the pandemic," man, I would have been, hey, that's fine. I would have been totally okay with that. I would have supported that 100% wholeheartedly. I think even the police would support that. I think even the most pro-cop people in Austin would have supported that. But instead, it's like, hey, no, we're going to give a bunch of money to homeless services, and we're going to give $100,000 to Planned Parenthood, when you already have like reproductive health is already like pretty good here in Austin anyway. Like, there's literally no need to give $100,000 more to Planned Parenthood. And I'm pro-choice, dude. I'm 100% pro-choice. I'm just saying that there's just no need for, like, that money could have been better served helping pedicab drivers who couldn't work during South by.
Yeah, there's a I saw a protest on Tuesday, I believe. It was right after Labor Day. They were protesting in front of the Capitol. They were part of a union for entertainment industry workers, like roadies and stuff, and they had they pushed the big black boxes you keep like audio equipment in, with signs about extending the $600 because unemployment's been canceled. I mean, not canceled, but it's gone. It kind of ended, Do you think they should continue, like, giving the pandemic-related unemployment money, like the $600?
I think $600 is a lot. I think what they should do, though, instead of that, is they should cut it down to like $300 or $400, but just let people work and collect it throughout the year without any consequences.
Okay.
That's what I think they should do. They should just, up until the end of the year, they should just let everybody who's been out of work just collect the extra $300 and then just let them still collect it while they're going back to work.
All right, cool. Can I talk about something? Going back to kind of like protest culture, and something that kind of surprised me was, and gives me a little bit of hope from like a lot of the protests I've been to and like covered, was the aspect of mutual aid and seeing people come together and enroll in needed roles without having like a financial need for it. So, I mean, when I was in DC, I remember running into the PDX snack van, who was just giving away free food to people on both sides, and they're known to do that. And just having people show up who work as like RNs and doctors, and they show up in medic garb to treat people who get injured from heat exhaustion and stuff like that. And of course, even in the early days in Austin here, we had pedicabbers like yourself following the protesters in case someone got injured, so they could quickly evac them.
Yes.
And it's like this mutual aid aspect that I see is it kind of it brings me confidence in how people can take care of each other without a need for an economic exchange, because I feel like people get really like this wrong, especially like in our days. Not everything people do is like an economic exchange. I feel like that's kind of an ideology pushed really hard by like social Darwinists, and survival of the strongest. But we're all strong together, and if we help each other, we don't really need to have like this economic exchange of money constantly, but help each other, like mutual aid. I'm here right now talking to you. You're talking to me. There's no money being exchanged right here. It's kind of like a friendly thing, and I saw that a lot at protests. People like I fell, cut open my arm. Immediately, two medics ran over and like put on lights, like bandaged me up, and I don't know. I have confidence that people are better than we really think they are. They just have to be able to find their right like niche to go into, and to give back to society in a better way. Because I've seen a lot, like as like our economy has gone down here, and people went out of work, and there's more homeless on the streets. I see so many mutual aid organizations like Cook for a Cause, which was actually started by Garrett Foster and Whitney.
So
and
tell me about that, and I want to learn more about Garrett Foster, because I really think that guy was murdered. Like I'm almost 100% sure that Garrett Foster was murdered, and I'm telling you this as someone who thinks that Kyle Rittenhouse is being wrongfully charged of what he's doing. Like I 100% like believe with like near absolute certainty that Kyle Rittenhouse was just a good kid defending himself and trying to help and defend small businesses and put fires out, and he was attacked and he had no choice but to use that weapon, or he felt like he had no choice but to use that weapon. And that being said, I still think that Garrett Foster was murdered, and I'm putting this Kyle Rittenhouse thing out there not to talk about it too much, because I talked about that more on my first podcast. But I'm putting that out to just really justify the claim as an objective person, to further solidify and justify the claim that I really do think Garrett Foster was murdered.
yeah, it seems to me that whole event, I think Daniel Perry, right, the driver who shot Garrett, it seemed like he kind of intentionally did that. Within a couple of seconds of him turning into the crowd, he rolled down his window and pulled a gun out. It was very quick. It was within like 10 seconds that this happened. And before this event happened, he was talking on social media about how he wanted to shoot protesters. I think it was kind of premeditated. Of course, we can't know for sure.
I think that it was premeditated.
There hasn't been a court case for it
so
yet.
I think that it was well, then there's not going to be, because it was premeditated self-defense.
Yeah, well, he's also part of the military. He's from Fort Hood.
It's premeditated self-defense. You know what that means, right?
No, explain it a little bit, but I understand kind of the concept.
He got involved in the situation where he felt like he was being threatened and being attacked. And if you saw the video, and if you see somebody coming up to your car with an AK-47, like most people who are like of reasonable sanity could say, "Hey, man, this guy's being attacked and he has to defend himself." But he also could have very easily, deliberately put himself into a situation where he had to defend himself.
So you're saying he intentionally wanted to get attacked? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that I would not be surprised if that were the case. Like, I can't like say this with certainty, but would you be surprised if that were the case?
No, not really.
Not really, right?
The way he drove into the crowd, clearly seeing all those people.
Yeah, and then look, he made a right turn, and you're allowed to make a right turn.
but not
he
into
could have,
people.
and he may not even have driven into people. He could have just maybe made that right turn because he knows, because people, like a lot of these protesters too, are rightfully afraid of violence, right? So a lot of people are so on edge that they might think that somebody's attacking them when they're not being attacked too. There is that factor.
Well, it's because there's a lot of fear. Like
There's
a lot
of
these,
fear. There's a lot of fear,
these
dude.
protesters, they don't use their real name because they're afraid of the police because they've seen what happens to them.
But
and
I've
seen the
okay.
police specifically go after protesters while on the sidewalk in front of APD. I watched a woman who was speaking on a megaphone get tackled by police and then released the next day with, like, I think it was resisting arrest charges. But this was on the sidewalk, which she was arrested on.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And
and it's a problem when our police officers like tackle people when they're not doing anything physically harmful, but then they do nothing when people are rioting and destroying businesses.
Well,
that is a like legitimate problem.
during that night, when the kind of like riot happened here with the looting and everything, like the police did show up in mass. They locked down like the entirety of 6th Street. I've never seen so many police in my life. They did have a response to it. It was just like pretty slow.
Well, they didn't do anything. Like those businesses still got looted. They did nothing, and very few of the people who actually like looted those businesses got had any consequences for their actions.
It's true. I don't know any of them that were even arrested, to be honest.
And then here's another problem with the protesters too, right? Because look, and I've talked to them in person, and I like most of them. Like most of the people that I interact with when on both sides of protesting, I have relatively positive interactions with, right? And one of the Garrett Foster, one of those like Garrett Foster kids is like a homeless kid, and he was like cold and didn't have a jacket yesterday. Like, so I have like an extra sweater to give him like after this whole thing is over, right? But like one of my criticisms of these protests, right? And here's what makes them different from the reopen protests, and it's that these a lot of the BLM like quote unquote Antifa protests, when they protest, they're like yelling and screaming at the cops, and they're like, "Hey, fuck you, pig!" You know, and they're really they are aggressive. Wait, hold on, let me finish. They are aggressive towards those police officers, either verbally or physically. In Austin, it's usually verbal. And even when Garrett Foster died, dude, and the cops were on the scene trying to help him, which they were horrible at doing because they weren't trained to help, you know, the people, and you were there, the people there were yelling and screaming at the cops when they were trying to help Garrett Foster. I saw that shit personally. And then whereas the reopen protesters, they're out protesting and they're very blatant about it, but they're telling the cops, "Hey man, we love you guys are doing great," and they just talk to the cops in a different manner, so they're able to just get away with more stuff. So I think that like a lot of that there is a communication issue. Like you could be protesting police accountability, and you could be like advocating for meaningful police reform without being antagonistic, and that's just my take on it.
Okay, so I have been to these lockdown protests too, and I have seen them kind of antagonize police. I watched Alex Jones walk up to DPS troopers in front of the Abbott's mansion, or Abbott's like little mansion in front of the state capitol, and like specifically yell at them with like a megaphone several times.
Really? What did he say though?
He was literally just making animal noises. He was like, "Rrr, rrr, 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 rrr." It was really strange. I was like,
But it's also Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Like, it's also Alex Jones, and like when Alex Jones is yelling with a megaphone, like that's just part of his personality.
Yeah, it's things attached to him by the hip, and whenever he leaves, basically.
Yeah, that's just Alex Jones.
Yeah, but still, I think it is sort of antagonistic.
A little bit,
sense. But I did also see them turn around, shake the police officers' hands as well.
Yes,
people who were there.
Yeah. So there's a lot of the people that were protesting the shutdowns were a lot nicer to the cops that were there, and I think that does put the officers at ease and probably limits a lot of these hostile interactions.
Yeah.
And I know that it's different too because like the cops are there to preserve like their standard of living, and I hear all those arguments, but dude, still, I think that generally speaking, people respond to positivity more than they respond to negativity. So I just think that probably plays a bigger role than people make it out to be.
I agree. It's kind of stroking their ego a little bit by like saying they're like they like them, but you can't expect people who are protesting like police brutality to be like really nice to the people who are brutalizing them. And to be honest, like I've seen that. I went to a protest once in front of the police department. Went to like go film it and just see what's there. I think I actually talked about this on Cargill's show. I was calling in when it was happening. They ended up arresting about 18 people, but there were two groups. There was the Wind Therapy Riders, which is a biker gang that came up, parked in front of basically where all the police parked their cars. They came up. There was a lot of them. They just had flags, and they were very argumentative with the anti-police protesters here. And they got up in their face. They pushed each other around. But the police only arrested the anti-police brutality people. They didn't touch the bikers at all. They shook their hands and were like nice to them. I think it really makes people very afraid and kind of justifies their hatred of police officers when you see something like this.
Yeah, all right. I get that, man. I get it. But then, look, here's another thing, too, man. And it's that when Garrett Foster died, I was trying to, like, give rides to people who were protesters so they wouldn't get arrested. And I was there for, like, an hour and a half or for, like, a fucking long time, right? Maybe, like, I don't know if it was an hour and a half or what the exact time frame was, but I was there for, like, a good minute. And nobody took a ride. I'm like, hey, man, if any of you guys need a ride, I don't want to see any of you guys get arrested or anything happening. If y'all need a ride to get out of here, please let me know, man. I'm happy to take you. I don't want any money or anything. I just want to make sure you're safe. Nobody took that ride, and it just seemed as though, like, the way they were, like, talking to the cops throughout this whole situation, it seems as though, like, some of these people want to get arrested. Like, there's an MO to get arrested with a lot of these people, from what it seems like.
They want to stand in solidarity for this, and they want to agitate that in a way because they're fighting police brutality, so they have to be there. Sitting at home doesn't do anything for them. So when I was in D.C., I saw this a lot. I remember specifically one man, he was standing in front of the police line. I was there, too. I was just taking a picture of all the cops with the riot shields. They maced him. He fell down. I helped carry him out and poured water in his eyes and milk, and he got up, and he's like, all right, I'm going back in. And he just walked back in. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, when I was there, people got smoked out. They got flashbanged. I personally was hit with like 2 flashbangs. A very disorienting thing. But I saw them. People would get injured. And they'd turn around. They'd walk slowly, calmly back out, away from the police, and then turn around and go right back in. They're protesting in like solidarity for this. So they're not going to leave just because like you were nice to them, because they want to push this and they want to achieve something. And I think like
but we got to be careful. We got to be careful with what we're achieving.
Yes.
We have to be very careful with what we are achieving, because if we fully defund law enforcement and do things in the way in which like these people want to do, look, man. A, you could create a crime wave. B, you could increase profiling. C, you could put vulnerable groups like the LGBTQ at a heightened risk because there are no police officers to help protect them, and they still are victims of large inordinate amounts of violence despite all the progress that they've made. And E, you also create more vigilantism. The more you defund these police officers, and the more like you limit the scope of like, the more you like limit the amount of people that can actually be cops and protect these communities. Especially with all this protesting and all this rioting and all this shit that's happening as a result of it, dude, you're just gonna create vigilantism like the byproduct of fully defunding these departments is going to be more Kyle Rittenhouses, whether you like it or not, and we got to be careful about that, man. There's got to be a balance.
Yeah. So when I was on Cargill's show like a week ago, I talked to Ora Houston, a former city council member, and I asked her the same thing that I asked you. So a rise in vigilantism, she wrote about this too. She's like, white vigilantism specifically disproportionately affects black communities. And she said by defunding the police, you're going to, like you said, raise more vigilantism. More people are going to be doing that stuff, like in like Kyle Rittenhouse.
Although none of the people that Kyle Rittenhouse shot were even black. They were all white people.
Yeah, I was just bringing that up because that's what she wrote about.
Yeah. And
I've seen the police specifically protect vigilantes because it was the reason Garrett originally started carrying a gun or a rifle with them at the protest, because in front of APD, a guy pulled up and pointed a gun at all the protesters and then drove his car into where like the kind of APD's like area where they keep the vehicles in, and the police kind of like protected him, and I think that eroded a lot of trust as well. And because of that, Garrett started carrying a rifle.
I did not know that. And I also, like I said, I really think he was murdered, and I also think that it's going to be hard to prove that because it was what was like deliberate self-defense. I said it was like intentional self-defense is what he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's military too, so he's going to have to go through the court.
Well, but that's also weird too. It's like why is an active sergeant in the military driving for Uber?
Okay, that's
actually, also a little.
That's actually apparently it's a pretty common thing for people from Fort Hood to come out here and do Uber because there's much more people, more money to be made.
Yeah,
And
and
that's what
also,
I've heard.
yeah, and somebody else told me that they drive like the soldiers. They give them like a $20 flat fee and just drive them from the base back to into Austin, and then they give them like safe rides back, and there's all that stuff too. So yeah, I heard that. But what I was saying about Garrett Foster is that I don't think that guy was like a terrorist or a violent person.
Of course
I
not.
really don't. Like, I feel like I would get along and like want to smoke a joint with Garrett Foster. Like, if Garrett Foster was alive, I'd want to have a beer and like smoke weed with him and stuff like that. Even though we don't like share the same political ideologies, like he seems like a nice person and somebody that I would like want to be friends with and and like hang out with and stuff. You know, like I really feel like he's a good person. You know, like he had his girlfriend who had all these physical ailments, and he was like taking care, or his fiance that he was like taking care of. Like this guy genuinely wanted to do the right thing, and I also think that a lot of the people in that group of Garrett Foster, that whole Garrett Foster group of people, I think the majority of those people are really nice people too.
Yeah, because they're the same people I always see at these mutual aid, like Feed the Homeless, and it was Garrett, I think, who started the sorry if I get this wrong, but I think it's him in that group that started the Cook for a Cause that feeds people under I-35. And the people who are protesting out there are the ones who are helping try to make change, positive change, through mutual aid in our community, because most of those people don't have a lot of money to give, so they give back their time and labor.
And that's very admirable. Like that is super admirable. And I just want to also like elaborate on this whole Garrett Foster thing, because a lot of people are going to see that video, and a lot of people, they see what happened in Portland, and they see what happened in Kenosha, and they see like, you know, you start seeing other videos where BLM like protesters are going up to people in restaurants and like trying to terrorize people in restaurants, making them all raise their fists and trying to like really yell and carry on, and they're like overdoing all this stuff, right? And you see this, and then it justifies this. It kind of in a way justifies what happened to Garrett, which is kind of unfortunate.
I don't think that at
well,
all.
it doesn't justify it, but like it justifies
Definitely doesn't justify it.
I'm not saying it justifies it, but what it does is
I think it creates a lot of reactionaries who.
It creates reactionary politics, and it in a lot of people's heads. A lot of people are gonna. It like creates a notion in people's heads that Garrett had it coming, which he didn't. Does that make sense? Like that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Like I think it creates a notion that.
That and a lot of disinformation, because like the police report says there was no round even chambered in his rifle at first, and like to be honest, like I think a lot of the like disinformation we saw on stuff like Facebook and Twitter, it pushes to people to do extreme things because people are afraid, because everyone's so on edge because of 2020.
Yes.
And just recently, I saw like a report. These people were driving around like kind of like Oregon, kind of like the country area, covering the wildfires, and these people also covered like the protests and stuff like that. And they were approached by people with rifles telling them to leave because Antifa is setting fires in the woods outside of Portland. And like that's completely false information. Even the local police departments, they're like doing everything they can to try to say that this is false, you should not say this, but still disinformation gets spread so easily. And I think it's a hard thing like to be in our time and have to wade through all this stuff and find the truth. But it's way too easy for people to just become super reactionary towards things.
Dude,
people need to think for themselves and critically think about what they see,
Taylor,
especially on social media.
100%. And I think that you know, people are so divided, and they see too much like reactionary politics on social media. And this is where I was going with all like the Portland stuff and everything. And it makes people feel as though they are a lot more threatened than they actually are by people who are different. So, you know, like if somebody were to look at what happened to Garrett Foster and then see the videos of what happened in Portland and some of these BLM guys like, you know, ganging up on people in restaurants, right? If you were to see all of those videos and then you had to be on a jury to judge Garrett to like decide the fate of Garrett Foster's killer, what are you gonna do, man? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's gonna be really difficult for somebody in a jury to like convict after seeing all of these other videos and all this other stuff that's happening. You know what I mean? So I think that reactionary politics is definitely creating these biases. And I also think that, you know, if people spent less time on these platforms, there wouldn't even be that person would not have even felt the need to do what he did to Garrett.
Yeah, I just think just turn it off. Stop looking at these black screens, these black mirrors. Go out and actually talk to one another.
I agree. No, I agree. I deactivated my social media for like 2 months or something like that, and I'm only reactivating it now because of city council. And once the election's over, I'm probably going to go back to like going dark unless this podcast winds up generating some crazy traction and people really like it. And then, you know, it is what it is, and you have this amazing thing that you're doing to bring people together. But if I don't see like a purpose as to why I'm on social media, I'm not going to engage on these platforms. So that's really like how I feel about this. And you know what else I want to talk about, man?
Yeah.
And it's that look, I have a lot of criticisms of mainstream liberal journalists, right? But I think that one of the things that we also need to talk about is we need to talk about like the biases that right-wing journalists and right-wing personalities are
Oh yeah, I think
perpetuating
I
into people.
think
And
a
we
lot
got
of
to
them,
talk about that too. That's important also because there's biases on both sides.
I think a lot of them kind of push like kind of violence against people, and it kind of scares me from both extremist sides. And it is like I don't want to see people in my city like attacking each other on the streets. It's not something I want to see.
Dude, like the entire Trump campaign, and look, I hate Joe Biden, right? I'm horrified of a Biden presidency. But that being said, the entire the entire Trump campaign and so many right wing like pundits are calling the BLM protesters Biden supporters, and that's like the farthest thing from the truth. If you were to actually go and talk to these like the majority of these BLM protesters, they hate Joe Biden, dude.
Yeah, none of these people are liberals. That's the thing that bothers me the most. They're like, oh, these fucking liberals, and I'm like, they're not liberals. They have kind of a revolutionary mindset. And something I see often, even painted on the walls of our city, is revolutionaries don't vote. So these people aren't voting.
Yeah, these are
That's
not.
why
Biden,
they're in the streets.
These are not Biden voters.
No,
And
definitely
if,
not.
And if anything, like the stuff that's happening and the stuff that you see that you're seeing on Twitter with like how this violence is getting out of control, especially in areas like Portland and whatnot, right? Because in Austin we're actually pretty cool. We have it pretty where it's actually like extremely safe and very much under control, and it's at a point where you could just have a dialogue. And the way it is in Austin is actually really good right
Austin's
now.
by far the safest city I've ever lived in.
Austin is great, but the way that it is in like Portland, Chicago, and these other major cities in Los Angeles, dude, this is a giant advertisement for Trump to get reelected. This is a fucking advertisement for Trump to get reelected.
Well, they can use it as propaganda to get him like elected, but that's why I'm telling people like you should just critically think about stuff. And I know like you see them go out and like agitate really hard against people, and I think it's violent. You shouldn't like attack people at restaurants, but
you shouldn't.
There's
no reason for that. There's no reason for it.
It does hurt the cause a little bit.
No, a lot. No, it destroys the cause. It
right.
destroys it. It fucking decimates it. It's a fucking dog whistle for fascism, is what it is. That's what it is. It is fucking fascism because A, when you try to make somebody like raise their fist up in solidarity for you without it being of their own choice, that's fucking oppression, right? That is oppression in some capacity. Because I would do it if I like was asked to, like if I like out of free will. But if you make people do stuff like that, like outside of their own free will, that is oppression, dude. Like that is fascism, 100%. And then when you see people doing stuff like that, and you see all this violence and the property damage and what happened in Kenosha and all that stuff, this makes people want law and order. And Donald Trump is literally positioning himself as the law and order candidate. This is a giant dog whistle for Donald Trump to get reelected.
A little bit, you're right. And I think it's really bringing people out. I see a lot more like reactionary like movements than I see more people out there with Trump flags and protesters now in Austin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about what's going to happen on Election Day because I really do feel like I think Trump's going to fucking win in a landslide. I really do. Like, I think that Trump is going to win in a landslide, but because of all the mail-in voting, it's not going to be like they're not going to concede or accept the results. And whatever we're seeing right now, I think is going to be amplified to like another fucking level as a result of it. And I also think, and people are also fucking stupid, and they think that if Biden were to win the election, this is all going to stop. No, dude, it is not going to stop because a lot of these people, like we said, they hate liberals. Dude, look at what's happening in Portland too. Like, people think that Wheeler is like the most progressive mayor that there is, but they're burning his house down, man. Like, this has nothing to do with a Democrat versus Republican at all. This has to do with anarchy and revolution. This has to do with literally just trying to destroy an entire system.
Yeah, that's what revolutionary is.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, people need to understand that understand the context of this, you know?
Of course. Touching on Wheeler, that dude really likes tear gas. You hear they just banned CS gas in Portland?
No.
Yeah, it came after it was near like a residential area. I don't know the exact location, but they ended up shooting off a lot of tear gas in the residential area, and ended up all these people in their homes getting like tear gas.
That's pretty fucking nuts, man.
Yeah, it is fucking nuts. I know we banned a lot of that stuff here in Austin because of how violent that first weekend was.
And here's another thing too, man. Like, we're probably gonna have to wrap this up pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
But Do you think that like that first week of protests helped like spread the COVID virus?
I think the statistics on that, I kind of tried to run them, and I couldn't figure it out because that was kind of the exact same time the bars reopened, and it was fucking crazy out there.
Yeah.
Like, I even helped do a story about the bars opening, and then the protest happened, and knowing that the bars, some people in the bar are wearing masks, and everyone's wearing masks at the protest, except sometimes the organizers just because they got to talk in the mic, the megaphone, but I don't know. I can't tell if it was because those two events happened pretty much on top of one each other.
Exactly.
So it's hard to get statistics for that.
Right.
And to say which one.
And you think that was almost done on purpose so they could just blame the bars and just not blame the protests? Like that's always like.
No, I think it's coincidence.
Like, you think it's coincidence?
Yes.
Maybe.
Because the bars are already opening.
A week
or
so, right?
Yeah, and then
but
the whole George Floyd thing
here's
happened.
the thing, right? Like, and nobody was really wearing masks when it came to going to the bars or going out, right? Like
Very true. They still
that's
kind of
100%
aren't.
true. Yeah. But at the same time, like you said, they still kind of aren't. And our active cases have plummeted by over 75%, and so have our hospitalizations in Austin and in Texas. While things have been open and people aren't wearing masks when they're going out, and nobody gives a shit, to be honest.
Yeah, it seems we're kind of over the hump of that, and we'll see kind of how it continues.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And there are also not any protests, like social justice-wise, going on right now in Austin. So now we're going to get a better barometer as to like what caused what.
There's still a lot more planned for the end of this month.
Fine, but at the end of really, what's planned at the end of the month?
I just still have two protests that are planned. One was by kind of the people who were protesting throughout the months, and then there's another like a new group.
Fine, but it's not going to be like a 10,000+ protest, right? It'll probably be like a small protest full of people who are part of these groups that want to like enact change. It's going to be it'll be like a more grassroots type of protest,
Yes,
not like a corporate funded like move on Soros open society type of protest.
Yeah, there's a lot of grassroots.
Yeah, it'll be
here.
and grassroots stuff is fine. We should have more grassroots protests, but the protests that we saw that first week in Memorial Day, after Memorial Day, that was not grassroots at all. Like that was the most astroturfed thing that that you could ever imagine.
It was like a reaction.
But it was totally astroturfed. There's no way that you could organically organize 15 to 25 million people to stand next to each other in the middle, like in the street right at once. Like there's no way that you can organize that unless there are people at the top helping to facilitate that.
You don't think it was just something that like we saw these protests spread across the country, and then like a day after that, everyone just went out? You don't think it was just an autonomous thing?
No, I do not. I think that a lot of people have justifiable feelings for police accountability and for police brutality and for instituting meaningful police reforms and holding cops accountable, but that did not feel like it was organic in any capacity. I really don't think it did, and it doesn't take away from the message. Like the message, it's a message that we should be adapting, but I just don't think that. I think that message was being exploited and it was being weaponized, and I think that when 15 to 25 million people are standing next to each other in the face of a pandemic, and then you also have to factor in that like people are getting tear gassed and they're getting maced, and what happens when you get maced and tear gassed? What do you do?
It sucks.
What do you do physically when you start getting tear gassed and maced? Like, what do you do?
You leave. You wash yourself off with like.
No, what are you doing? Like, what are you immediately doing once you start getting fucking maced or tear gassed?
What do you mean? Probably
coughing.
In pain. Yeah, coughing.
You're coughing.
Yeah,
and you're coughing.
Okay,
and 15 million people are coughing on one another in the middle of a pandemic, and you don't think that's gonna like help spread a
15 million is a lot, but
no, throughout the country it was 15 to 26 million people. That's a documented statistic of people who are out there protesting this George Floyd stuff.
What do you think about all the people arrested for like peacefully protesting? Do you think they'd have their charges dropped? Because a lot of them they're just kind of getting arrested for like resisting arrest. Like I know this happened to Hiram. They dropped him eventually. He was just out. He's a local journalist too. He's a live
he's the
streamer.
guy who filmed Garrett Foster getting shot.
Yeah, and he was arrested kind of by police then, and they put resisting arrest charges on him, and then released him the next day along with some other people there that night as well. And do you think they should just drop these charges against people?
I think a lot of the charges should get dropped. I think like the resisting arrest charges should probably get dropped, right? Or if people are like get arrested for like these misdemeanor stuff, definitely. But if you're like from out of state and you're coming like to Kenosha, Wisconsin, you're from Texas to go to Kenosha and protest, like, dude, get the fuck out of here, man. You're literally like invading another person's space, man. Like, you know what I mean?
It's still America, though.
Yeah, it is America, but it's like, especially when you know what these protests are turning into after like the first week in Memorial Day, like you're doing what you're doing is not about instituting meaningful change. It's about creating chaos, especially if you're like from another part of the country and you're going like another part of the country far away. not like 20 miles away in the neighboring state, right? But if you're like from like, you know, hundreds of miles away going to a certain area to go and protest and you get arrested, man, that's on you, dude. You better be like, if you're going to do that, you better be as peaceful as you can while you're doing that.
Okay, I get that.
You know, if you're gonna come from like another state, right, far away to protest police reform and police brutality, let the people who live in that area be in the front lines. It's not your job to be in the front lines. If there's a protest in Wisconsin, you come from Texas to go protest in Wisconsin, guess what you should not be doing? Being on the front line. You need to like back up and let the people who live in that area be the ones who take charge of that movement, and your job is to like provide food to people and make sure that the other people on the front are safe. And if you're doing that, you're probably not getting arrested.
I don't know. I saw that night with the snack van in DC. The same day they like fed us, and I'd been there. I watched the police break the windows of that van and arrest the guy. And he was just sitting there
giving snacks.
Yeah, he was in.
That's
it was
bad.
in Black Lives Matter Plaza.
Okay, that's
next,
really
behind the White House.
Okay. That's really bad, and that's another reason why I'm happy that you're on the show telling me this stuff, because a lot of people aren't aware of that, and I'm glad that you're bringing that up.
They only see one side,
and I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because that is a huge problem, and it's only perpetuating all the bullshit that we're dealing with right now.
And it scares people. That's why people don't use their real names, because they're fucking terrified of what the police are going to do to them. And like why do we want that? Why do we want to have like an entity like above us that enforces this thing that we have to be afraid of? Do you really want that? Do you want to be afraid? And a lot of people are.
Dude, I don't want that, because at the end of the day, man, like, what if the cops were to act the way they were acting around me because I don't want to wear a mask or I don't want to get the COVID vaccine? It's all two sides of the same coin, so we all have to be understanding of that. And this is something that we all got to be working together on. And I really hope that the people who are in charge of like these grassroots movements understand that even people on the right don't want a police state either.
Yeah, we really got to like kind of like I think the slogan I heard the most in like and I don't really like slogans too much because they're really authoritarian in their own right, but the one thing that stuck me a lot from like when I was in DC was the "we keep us safe," and it was just about protecting your neighbor through like kind of mutual aid. And someone wrote a book about it, and it was about kind of abolishment of police, and it was just about removing that that system that sits on top of us. And it's just about, like you said, everyone should like learn jujitsu and stuff, like be able to take care of each other. And do you think you could see a better society without police, as long as we have a culture of taking care of one another, and not a culture of exploiting each other? Because I feel like American culture is very exploitive, and
I think the entire global culture is very exploitive because of consumerism.
Yeah,
we're
we're rewarded for exploiting each other.
I think America's the greatest country in the world, dude. I think America gives us the greatest opportunity from somebody to like come from nothing to like actually make something of themselves.
I agree.
Dude.
That's why so many people immigrate here.
Like, I love this place. I love America, and I love our financial system, and I love everything about this country. And that being said, I think that like what's happened with COVID and what's happened with these protests has really like solidified that we honestly live in the greatest country in the world, and it's also solidified the fact that we need to do a lot of self-improvement to continue that. And hopefully we can continue doing self-improvement while this is happening.
Yeah, I agree. We always have to continuously check on ourselves and our neighbors to see what we can do better for each other. And I think people should really go outside, even if you live in the suburbs, and knock on your neighbor's door, cook them something, be nice, like learn about each other. Like, people are so disconnected because they're just staring at these like black mirrors all the time. We need to like connect, and I think that's something I've seen happen in COVID, because the fear is kind of spreading everywhere, and that fear makes people come closer together. Sometimes, as long as it's not directed at specific groups, like calling someone a Nazi or calling someone a Antifa, because behind those labels, behind that hate is a person, you know? And each one of us, if we sit down and talk, we'll learn that we aren't so different from each other, and that we can really build a better society by getting just simply to fucking get to fucking know each other, you know?
Dude, I agree. And I think there's no better way to end this episode than on that note.
Yeah, love one another, guys.
Yeah. So Taylor, thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to do this.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, of course. You know, ultimately, you know, there's a lot of tension going on right now. You know, there's a lot of like civil unrest. There's a lot of economic inequality, and you know, there's no surefire way as to how we can solve all of these problems, but continuously being at each other's throats and arguing with one another is a surefire way to make it worse. So let's all do a better job of communicating with one another in a more positive light, and let's use this crisis as a way to like make ourselves into better people. And I think this is something that we can do, and I think this is also something that all of us want to do. And hopefully this this show and this series can help guide us somewhat in the right direction.
Make sure to call your mom, guys. She misses you.
Call your mom and your grandmother if she's alive, and your aunt and every other family member that you have.